Alright, hello again, it's Ian. As you can see, back with another video, just going through some records I've picked up recently. This time it's got a little bit of a twist. Alright, so basically this time I was going through my want list on Discogs, looked at 2 or 3 records in the same shop. All 3 of them were underneath £1, so I thought, why don't I try and stretch this and see if I can get a full 10 for £10 vinyl shop on Discogs. This is post and packaging not included, obviously. I'm going to put a little mix together as well, but for now I'm just going to go through, tell you why I chose these records, why I like them, a little bit of information about the artist and the label as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. First record we've got is by a group called Top Cats, and this is a white label which is called Family Affair Le Sucre Mer. There's 2 tracks on there basically. Both sides of this record basically nice thumping, disco looping deep house, quite European sounding. It's got a nice smooth groove but still got quite hard hitting drums on there. Top Cats is basically a duo composed of a guy called Greg Van Buren and another DJ called DJ Jaronski. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I like it because it's got quite a groovy sample, can work in well in a deep house set. Beginning of the night, peak time, end of the night, depending where you want to play it. It's quite a versatile record. Obviously both tracks are really nicely produced, sound really great, so went for that. Alright, next up we've got a record called Noise by Paul Johnson. This record is out on Riviera. If you've watched my last video, you basically know what they're about. It's an old French label that used to work with a lot of Chicago artists. And I don't think I really need to give Paul Johnson any explanation. He's a legend, just search him up. Could be quite jarring for some people. Basically it's a kind of looping, thumping beat, a few little chords on there, but the main component is really high pitched, screaming saw synth. So, you know, you might find it annoying. Personally, I think it bangs. It's probably only for club use. I don't think it's something you'd listen to at home, but still sick, worth the buy. It's only one-sided though. I think that's one downside to it. There's no B-side, so it's only 1 track. Next up, we've got Crico Castelli presents the Coffee Kids with the Voyager EP. This record's out on a label called Illegal Beats, which is a sub-label of a larger label called Jalapeno Records, and they both put out quite groovy European style house music. The Coffee Kids are composed of 2 producers, a guy called Gavin Face Mills and another producer called Crico Castelli, who put out one of my favourite tracks in the track Life is Changing. If you've ever heard me play out, then you've probably heard me play that, and that's why I was drawn to that record initially. Both tracks on this EP, there's Voyager, which is the A-side, and Casa Loca, which is the B-side. Once again, slightly faster tempo, deep house cuts, so they're still very groovy, but at the same time they've got quite a good bit of motion to them. Good in a set, anytime, once again, beginning, end, peak time. You can listen to them at home, very versatile record there. Alright, next up there's a 2-track EP from Horse Jam. This one's called Crow, Big Booty. There's no EP name, it's just the name of both tracks on there. This is the only release I could find from the Horse Jam. They're a UK trio. Definitely worth checking out if you're into your more aggressive techno. This came out in the early 2000s on a label called Junior London, and they're affiliated with Junior Boyzone in some way. I couldn't really find out how. They've got releases from Express 2 on there, Heather and Farley. These are people that have released on Junior Boyzone before. I just couldn't really see the link. I couldn't find the link on the internet to how this got into that. The A-side Crow is like thumping techno with a little bit of a synth line over it. It's not my favourite, but the B-side on this, Big Booty, I think is an absolute slammer. It's kind of reminiscent of what Randomer, Blauan, people like that are making now, real big room thumping techno sounds. Next up we've got a record from a duo called Product Deluxe, and this is the Coco Paradise EP. It's only 3 tracks and they're all the same track basically, 1 track and then 2 remixes, but it's quite smooth, deep house, nothing too groundbreaking or, you know, barrier breaking, but still quite nice and smooth. A couple of remixes on there. It's out on a label called Product Deluxe. Not the most groundbreaking label either, but it's a lot of nice middle of the road stuff and it's quite cheap, so it's definitely worth having a look through their catalogue. Alright, next up there's an EP called The Promise, and this is by a producer called Each to Their Own. This came out on a label called Soulful Solutions. They've only had 3 releases and then they went. I'm not really sure what happened to them, but they put out basically smooth, soulful, gospel sampling house. And this was the only release from Each to Their Own that came out on the label. Alright, so there's 3 tracks on here, all quite smooth gospel house, nothing too crazy, nothing too noticeable about them, but nice tracks to maybe have on in the background of a warm-up set, or you know, something you can play when you're relaxing, nothing too crazy. Can't really find out much about the artist, but Each to Their Own was, to begin with, a gospel musician who kind of did his sermon, his preaching through house music. He started up a label called Stomp Music quite recently, still doing the gospel sound. Nothing too crazy, nothing too big, but some nice smooth sounds coming from his workshop. Alright, this is a record that I'm actually really into. And this one is called Controls the Sound, and it's by a producer, formerly a group of producers called Fresh and Low. It's basically house music with a sort of broken beat influence all the way through. So the first track is, you know, simple 4 to the floor house music, but it's got the nice broken beat chords, a little bit of jagged drums in there, kind of gives more of a shuffle than normal house music. The second track is a bit more garagey, but once again, it's got the same sort of lush chords over the top, the little Wurlitzer chords, and the quite syncopated percussion that you can get in broken beat. And once again, it's the same with the third track. Third track's more housey again. Alright, next up, this is probably my favourite record that I picked up out of the whole batch, just for one track. So yeah, this is by a group called Those Guys, and it's out on a label called Basement Boys Records, which is coming out of Baltimore, in the United States. Basement Boys is basically a production group, the late 80s to early 90s, and Those Guys are 3 people from that group of producers. If you haven't heard of the Basement Boys before, I think their most famous production that you'd know, because I don't think anyone won't know this, is Crystal Waters' Gypsy Woman. Absolute classic there. Go through their catalogue, they've got a lot more stuff like that, you know, 90s, New York, Masters at Work, sounding sort of house, but they're coming from Baltimore, so obviously they put their own little swing on how they do things. Definitely worth having a dig through their catalogue, there's a lot of hidden gems in there, I think. My last 2 records are both from the same label, and that is a label called Vicar Disco. The first one I've got is the first release from that label, and it's by a group called The Men from Mars. It's quite bouncy New York house again. It's by a group called Men from Mars, like I said before, which is 2 producers, one of them being Joey Negro. Can't remember the name of the other guy right now. A couple of acapellas on there for the producers out there, a couple of beat tracks on there. Definitely worth checking out. And once again, another Vicar Disco record. This time it's by the Away Team, but confusingly it's the same 2 producers again, just underneath a different name. Same sort of style, bouncy New York house, stuff that will go off in a club quite easily, quite accessible stuff. Definitely worth looking through their catalogue. Side note though, they've only got 4 releases. 3 of them are by those 2 and 1 of them by another artist, so I'll probably have the full catalogue by the time this video has gone up anyway. Yeah, so that's basically what I managed to pick up for Discogs on £10. I'm going to put together a little mix just to kind of put these tracks into context a little bit more. Gonna trickle a few onto the channel as well, because there's quite a few that aren't online anywhere. And if you've got any more suggestions for cheap records, or you picked up anything nice, just give me a shout. Leave it in a comment, give me a message on Twitter, on Facebook, on SoundCloud. I'm always listening, my inbox is always open. So, sound, cheers for watching.